This week, we are taking a trip to the planet Chromatica. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And this week, we will be discussing Lady Gaga's sixth studio album, Chromatica. One I'm very excited to discuss. I picked this as a leap year album, but I think it actually leads us quite well into what we'll be doing next. So that's an added bonus, but you'll find out why at the end. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. This is we took a week off last week, but that was, sometimes that's gotta happen. And we hope you enjoyed our rerun of The Score, but we're back at it into another realm now.
Yeah, man. Another realm indeed. This is one I had never heard. I wasn't familiar with anything on here. I thought for some reason that this was a much earlier in her timeline album, and this is after A Star Is Born, which I enjoyed because I like her mature sound. I like all her sound, but her mature sound is good stuff for me. So this was cool.
This was the follow-up to A Star Is Born. So this was an interesting time in Lady Gaga's career after that, if we're gonna go back a bit, because we've already covered Joanne on this show, which was the preceding studio release. If you haven't listened to that episode, check it out. But yeah, in 2018, Lady Gaga starred in a new adaptation of A Star Is Born with Bradley Cooper, and it was a huge success. And I wouldn't go so far as to call it a comeback, because she'd certainly still been in the conversation, but it was definitely a resurgence of sorts for her. Shallow was her biggest hit since Born This Way. So she was in the conversation in a way that she hadn't been in quite some time. And A Star Is Born was one of the most successful albums of its time. And it got her some new fans, people who would not have listened to Lady Gaga before.
That's awesome to hear, because it's a very polished, well-rounded sound all the way through.
It is, and it connected with the people in a way the Joanne album didn't quite. Not that album did badly. It was definitely influential, as we've discussed before. But even just peers of mine, I remember meeting people around and they were saying, like, I've never cared about Lady Gaga, but I love that song she does with Bradley Cooper. So she was definitely into another phase of her career and over a decade in. But interestingly, instead of continuing with this A Star Is Born aesthetic, she returned to her roots. The album was a work in progress already, her sixth album, at the time of A Star Is Born, but she had to do that. That took precedent. And not the hits on that album, but there were more traditional Lady Gaga dance pop songs on that album that served the film's narrative purpose very well, but they weren't the songs that everybody knew off the soundtrack. Some of them actually got pretty criticized, especially Why Did You Do That? It's like, that's actually a bad song. People thought was written to be a bad song because it was kind of silly, but for the film, it worked. But she actually was going back to her roots, but also writing about the real stuff, because despite all the success, she was dealing with a lot of trauma and had to write about it. And the Joanne album really did dig into her family's history, and she was hoping that it would help her, but it was not as cathartic as she expected it to be, which kind of prompted her to go back to the drawing board and go into this Chromatica thing, which has even been dubbed as therapy pop by some, which I think is a very accurate description, because she really delves into her mental health struggles and some of the events that have happened in her life that have been tough to grapple with, as we'll discuss track by track.
Yeah, I mean, not getting too far ahead, but an abundance of this album is really self-exploration, or just reflecting, on feelings all the way through. And I think that's the beauty of this album, is that real introspective look inside of a megastar.
Yeah, I actually would argue this is her most personal album. And she didn't really quite market it as such, but I think it is, because it really is autobiographical, and in a way that other stuff hasn't been, but it also offers a larger commentary, like much of her work does. as we've seen on this podcast before. So as for me, I by this point was definitely a Gaga fan. I wasn't initially, but I definitely was by like A Star Is Born time. And I saw the movie in the theaters. I loved it. I bought a Blu-ray of it. It was one of my favorite movies I'd seen. Still is. I haven't watched it in a while, but it's still a great movie. And the first announcement of this next studio project, it's funnily came up because of media rumors that Lady Gaga was pregnant, and she wrote on Twitter, "Rumors I'm pregnant? Yeah, I'm pregnant with LG6," referring to Lady Gaga's sixth studio album.
That's awesome.
Which was iconic. That was iconic, I thought. And things were pretty quiet. Like, we knew she was in the studio, but in January of 2020, the eventual lead single for the album leaked. So it was like, okay, there really is something coming. And a single was released in February. We'll talk about that song when we get to it. Yeah, so album announced for an April 10th release. Well, in between the end of February and April 10th was the month of March, when the world shut down because of a certain virus. We were all there. We all know what it was. So because of that, Lady Gaga delayed her album. It just didn't make sense to put it out at the time. And I'll give her credit for that, because she did actually go on the front lines and help with COVID relief, and didn't go out of her way to publicize it. The media mentioned, oh, she's doing it, but I really respected that she did that. I felt like she really is knowing what's going on and knows that this is more important than an album release. And I really respected her for that, even if it might have affected some of the performance, because there were people who really dragged her for not promoting the album enough. But I thought, well, she doesn't need to. She's Lady Gaga and she knows what's up, and she's focusing on what's important in the world right now. Even if as a fan I was saddened. I was like, yes, I want this album that's Chromatica. That title had been announced. It's like, I'm excited. I love the single, but wasn't the priority.
Yeah, classy move. Kudos to her on that. I mean, look at the other route. You've got literal fish in a barrel. You have the most captive of captive audiences we've ever had in the history of us. And you could have easily dropped the album and everybody would have been sitting in front of their computers or sitting in their house, regardless, ready to listen. So good on her, knowing that it wasn't the time. I did not realize that about this album, but that's a super powerful statement there by the classy Lady Gaga.
Most definitely. And there wasn't a date for a bit, but then it was eventually announced to be May 29th. So, I mean, by that point, I was very much excited for the album. Like, I listened to it at midnight release day. But unfortunately, this ended up not being the best timing either, because just days before, George Floyd was murdered. And that it was a weird climate to be putting out a dance album in. But again, I'll give her credit. She did know that, yeah, I know this is a bad time, but she turned over her socials to activists to discuss Black Lives Matter and police brutality instead of promoting her album, which again, I think was a really genuinely selfless thing to do, because she absolutely should have been promoting her album realistically, but she again knew this isn't the most important thing in the world. And that was a thing I really respected of her. She certainly did not have to make her social media a Black Lives Matter platform, even if many were, but she did that. And that was a really smart thing to do, I think. And I respected her for that as well.
Yeah, she's a New Yorker too, right?
She's a true New York girl.
Yeah, she has it in her. You know, not only is it a classy move, but that's some New York pull together characteristic that the New Yorkers share, in my opinion. So classy moves, man. Nothing else to say about that.
Yeah.
You know, it's she speaks without words on that shit. You know what I'm saying?
She did. She knew hers was not the voice that needed to be amplified that day. And so she didn't do that. But it kind of didn't. The album was obviously, she had a captive audience and a large fan base because she's Lady Gaga. and the album did once again debut at #1, like the previous few Lady Gaga albums had. And yes, so the album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, first week sales of equivalent 274,000 copies. And that was her highest total since opening week total since Born This Way, actually, which wasn't surprising. She was coming off the heels of a hugely successful soundtrack, and it was going to there were new fans also this time around, and it was an odd time maybe to go to this return to her roots, because this was her first dance pop album since 2013's Art Pop, which didn't do as well as the previous ones, and it was called Art Flop a lot at the time, but now it's a cult favorite album. So yeah, that's just how it goes, I guess. But critic reviews were good, and #1 in multiple countries. And yes, this was all during a pandemic. She couldn't promote the album quite the way that she wanted to. There was a really extensive campaign planned, and there was even talk of this planet with different zones and these kindness punks, and it was delved into. You'll see it in the album booklet and layout, but it was not probably entirely as envisioned, but that the world wasn't going to allow for that. And a lot of people have said the Chromatica era was so underwhelming. It's like, well, there was we were in a pandemic. There was really only so much that could be done. So I'll know what you want her to do. And I think that the album spoke for itself. This was a very, very exciting thing for me. I was really excited for it. I loved all the songs I'd heard beforehand, and I loved the whole album. This is my favorite Lady Gaga album, and I felt it was needed with all the strife in the world. It was an escape, a dance the pain away, which was kind of the mantra of it, as said by Lady Gaga herself. And I was completely on board with it. Completely.
Yeah, I can totally see that, especially in the way she structures her sound on this album. It's a real let loose, forget about everything, even though we get this introspective, but still yes. In its essence, forget about everything and dance it away. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, and that's another smart thing I really appreciate about this album. Is she once again worked with Blood Pop, who she did most of Joanne with, as well as Burns, and a lot of other producers were on these songs, but they really dived into a 90s house sound, and that was a really bold and smart move, because we're going for this retro / modern sound, but because it's already retro, we are able to create a somewhat more timeless sounding album. This doesn't sound dated because it already is retro, and I really respected that. And it did come with a wave, especially with Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia and what The Weeknd was doing. This retro house sound was very much in again, but who better to do it than Lady Gaga? She was a perfect artist for this.
Yeah, her and Blood Pop, you couldn't have asked for a better pair to do this. This is why it messed me up on the timeline so much. If you've listened to us for a while or first time, I'll let you know. My first listen through is no wiki, no nothing, as much blind listening as I can do. So I definitely, the way this was structured musically, thought it was inside of an earlier Gaga. But come to find out, it's that mature sound.
Yeah, it was the return to the earlier sound from a new perspective, and I was all the way here for it. And the era kind of went off and on. There was a tour announced for 2020. Of course, that was postponed a year and then postponed again. It finally did happen in 2022 with more dates added. It was going to be only 6 dates, but there ended up being over 20, and I got to see this tour at Nationals Park in Washington, D.C., and the organization at the venue was a total mess. I am not going to deny that. It was really difficult to get in and out of there and all that, but The show was absolutely incredible, and she did almost every song from Chromatica alongside hits from A Star Is Born and her earlier albums. So it was truly, I've been to a lot of concerts. That was probably a top 10 concert for me. And I've heard rumors of her going to the Sphere, and I know she would do the most with that space for sure, especially after seeing the Chromatica Ball tour.
Shit. Again, not getting too far ahead, but inside the Sphere, you do this back to front to back, game over. This
Yeah.
is a beautiful piece to do in its entirety.
I for the Sphere, she should do like an Eras tour in the Sphere. I feel like just use the space for all of the things she's done. It would be
Yeah,
perfect for any of them. Honestly, she's I hope it happens. I will pay a lot to see that. I am not going to lie.
it'll happen. It's a perfect venue for her.
Yeah,
I gotta believe that that's in the works.
I really hope it is. I will definitely. Yeah, I'll be there. I'll go into debt for it. I'm not ashamed to say that.
I mean, hopefully she does like Dead and Company does and extends out
Oh,
because
she'll have to do as many dates as you too, I would think. And
most
she's
definitely.
already had some success in Vegas, which we'll talk about that a bit, but that's been a different format for the most part. Much of that has been her doing jazz and piano, which I've heard is incredible.
Oh man, I love that Tony Bennett album. That's
Yeah.
down right down my alley. So that's one of the reasons I respect her so much is because she gets to show that full
Yeah.
opposite end of the spectrum talent. And I love to see that out of any artist.
Yeah, and that was another one of the projects in between Art Pop and this. We got the Tony Bennett Duets album. We got her on American Horror Story. We got Joanne, A Star Is Born, all these detours. And now she was going to come back home. And I'm really glad that she did. And now she's in the studio and writing again. So I'm very curious to see where she'll take us next.
Yeah, man.
Um, but in the meantime, we still have Chromatica to get through. It's one of my personal favorites, and I'm really happy to dive into this bad boy. I have a lot to say, so I don't want to waste any more time. I want to dive right in.
Let's get at it.
All right, so the album begins with a orchestral interlude, one of three, called Chromatica One. These were composed with musician Morgan Kibbe. I mean, these aren't full tracks, but I do think they help tell a cohesive story and help this work as a concept album in this Chromatica space. We'll talk about the best interlude when we get to it. I think you all know what it is if you're a Gaga fan and you're listening to it. But Chromatica One sets us into this, and then we go into the first actual track, which is Alice, inspired by Alice in Wonderland. This is just pure 90s house goodness all the way. And my favorite part's the bridge with the completely auto-tuned sick and tired of waking up screaming at the top of my lungs. It's a short and sweet song, under 3 minutes, but none of it's wasted. Obviously, I wish this song had a video, but that didn't happen. It's okay. Actually, this is a bold thing for me to say. This might be my favorite song inspired by Alice in Wonderland. And that's a bold statement for me because both Stevie Nicks and Taylor Swift have Alice inspired songs. So Gaga wins for me, though, because I love it.
Yeah, this is that jam. Seamlessly coming out of this orchestral cinematic build of Chromatica One, and then you drop right into some 90s house. I'm talking about like pure, not I won't use cookie cutter here, but a pure example, a masterclass of some 90s house beats. They are polished. It is a really great way to start an album. I like you said, the Alice in Wonderland metaphor or narrative here is awesome. We get a start of going through the looking glass, so to speak, in starting this introspective, and it jams out, man. I love the sound. At this point, opening this album up for the first time, I am excited, and I'm starting to dance. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Immediately, it's a great, great opener.
This is not an album you'll be able to sit still through.
Right.
It's just not. You will dance whether you planned on it or not. You will. And we're going to keep that train going with Stupid Love. This was the lead single, and it's actually, this is crazy to think about. It is Lady Gaga's first collaboration with Swedish pop mastermind Max Martin, who's worked with pretty much every major pop star that you can think of. And the fact that it took till 2019, 2020 for him to write a song with Lady Gaga is pretty mind blowing after all the hits he's done with her contemporaries. But it finally happened, and this song did leak ahead of its release. I did not listen to it because I don't do leaks, because that's not what the artist wants. I don't respect that, but many people did. And actually, because of the leak, there was thought maybe we need a new lead single, but they'd already put too much into Stupid Love to turn back on it. And I mean, I can see why this was the lead single. I really enjoyed this song the moment I heard it. This was my most played song on my Apple Music replay of 2020. Just a really fun pop song. That was what it set out to do, and it really succeeded. And they did a video entirely shot on iPhone, was the big gimmick for it, which was but it was still a really cool video because it sent us into the Chromatica universe. And I love the visuals of this album. I didn't talk about the cover. The cover is like a movie poster. It's incredible. And she was just in there with her pink hair and her futuristic suits dancing away. And she served it. It was a banger. It still is a banger in my book.
Yeah, it certainly is a banger. You keep the energy flowing here. The synthesizer work is super sick. The 90s inspired sample loops are in the forefront of the composition, but she keeps it melodic. She maintains this melodic sense, this major chord sense over top of the whole entire composition. And you're gonna hear me say it a bunch, but that's why she's a megastar. That's why she is, considered top of the game, because she pulls out stuff like this. I mean, even with the Swedish inspiration or collaboration, so to speak, it's just her alone on this track is mind-blowing. I don't have enough good stuff to say about this. It really is such a neat one. Again, first listen through, so like blown away at track 3 here.
Yeah, and at the time, I will say it was for me. It was nice to hear, like, even though I love the Detours, I love Joanne and the Stars Born. It was nice to hear a Lady Gaga dance song again. But at the same time, I didn't think this sounds like she's treading water. It didn't sound like she was trying to do Bad Romance 2.0 or whatever. I felt this was its own entity from the beginning. And I just really respected that from her. It's like, this is fresh and familiar at the same time. She's doing a great pop song, but not repeating herself. And I was there for it from the beginning. It debuted at number 5 on the Hot 100. It kind of faded quickly. I do blame a lot of that on it being leaked ahead of time. That did not help. But I think it deserved a longer chart run, but it's not a flop by any means. So, and it was a good lead single. I can see why they thought this was the right song to kick off the era with.
Yeah, man.
For sure. Not everybody ended up agreeing with me, but I am for this being the lead single. But now we're on to another single, and our first collaboration here, Rain on Me, a duet with Ariana Grande, a song about overcoming strife. It particularly references the struggle to stay sober, as in I'd rather be dry, but at least I'm alive. And Lady Gaga commented on the fact that Ariana Grande had experienced some rather public trauma. After all, she had a bombing at one of her concerts in Manchester. She lost Mac Miller, who was her significant other for a point in time. And it just ended up working, and the two women really hit it off. And I think you can hear that on the song. This was a duet that lived up to the hype, in my opinion. And I think Ariana Grande really shines on this type of song. She doesn't always go for dance tunes, at least up to this point. We'll see what happens come next week with this new album. But I really liked hearing her do that kind of song, especially since it had been a while since we'd heard that from her as well, frankly. And I again love the song, love the video, debuted at #1. I put this on repeat to help it debut at #1. I'm not ashamed to admit that because it's like it's gotta be a #1 hit. And it was, had legs. This one, 4 years old, it's a classic to me.
Yeah, I'm along for the ride. The Euro dance beats really start to shine here. And for me, on paper, I was like, Ariana Grande, Lady Gaga. I think Gaga is gonna drown out and without trying. It's Grande has, in my opinion, a much more demure voice as far as the commanding presence of a Lady Gaga voice.
Yes.
But here she does awesome, and it feels organic. It feels natural on this track. It doesn't feel out of place, and the back and forth that they do is super well done. On top, it's a really well done track. I go back to the line, you already said it, but I'd rather be dry, but at least I'm alive, is a powerful line inside of this struggle with alcohol, staying sober, period. So a neat narrative behind all this musical goodness. Flowing. You'd want to talk about pacing. Shit.
Yeah.
We haven't stopped dancing at track 4, so loving it.
Yeah, and we're going to keep on dancing with track #5, which is Free Woman, another very 90s house influenced track. This one was specifically inspired by Lady Gaga's struggle with PTSD after she was sexually assaulted by a music producer. The name of that person is not known. Just putting, some people like to speculate as to who it is, but we don't know who it is. And she also was inspired by the transgender community when writing this song, because she wanted to answer, what does it mean to be a free woman? And it's kind of about her reclaiming herself. Like, I'm not a victim or a survivor, I'm a free woman. And that's another really powerful message. This was another one that leaked in its demo form. It was a bit different from the album version, but I really like the album version anyway. And okay, I'll say this now. This is not close to my favorite song here. I do like it, but there are definitely better songs. I always immediately from the beginning thought this was a very single-worthy song, but this is very radio-friendly. It will resonate with a lot of people. It's a really good empowerment anthem that she does well. She'd done it before, certainly, with Born This Way. And it was a single in France only, and I think that was a really big missed opportunity. I think this should have gotten a video and worldwide release. I think it could have been a hit for her if given the chance. And that is one of the disappointments of the era. Even though there's songs I like better, I don't think they would have all resonated with as many people as this one would have if more had heard it. But I still really enjoy the song, and I'm happy it's here, even if I wish it got a wider reach than it did.
Very surprising. I'm with you there. I think it's a super single worthy track, a super empowering composition. I'm using your word straight out of my notes here. I love that. Great beat for me. And this isn't a negative thing. This is just me with a beautiful first time critical ear. I got Vogue tendencies throughout this musically, and it's really the first time on this album where we get a little hint. Put a pin in it. This is one of our reoccurring themes through this album, and I think it's so smart the way it's sprinkled in. And we'll get to more examples of it throughout, but musically right now, we're not just building track by track. At this point in the album, we're setting a foundation, so to speak, inside of this first third of the album.
Most definitely. And these it's funny you mentioned the first third because we are at the end of our first act now with track number 6, which is Fun Tonight. Actually the most misleading title on the album. I knew immediately when this track listing came out, I was like, okay, this is just going to be a very standard party song. It might be fun, but I was not expecting something to hit like Rain on Me or Stupid Loved It when I saw there would be a song called Fun Tonight. But it's actually about how she's not having fun tonight. I was like, okay, wasn't expecting that. So this song for me, for a whole year after this album was released, was definitely the least favorite for me. I thought it was kind of a filler, just didn't connect with me. It took me a year for it to connect, and that was because I finally was able to get this album on vinyl. My buddy Justin, who was on our Metallica episode now way back when, got this for me at Record Store Day. And I got to bring it with me when I moved out of my parents' house for the first time, really on my own. And it was so cool to have Chromatica with me through that as well. And I was listening to the full vinyl, and that was when this song really stuck out to me because at that point in time, I was going out, but not having a good time. It's like, I'm not having fun tonight, even though I am out. And it was in that moment that the song really clicked for me. And since then, it's been one that I've gone back to and really enjoyed. It's definitely not my least favorite now. You have to be in a certain mindset, I think, to connect with this song, but it's still got a good hook and good beat to it. So
It does. It's a good song. The Euro dance is here again. The narrative is super awesome. It's exactly not what you're expecting, on purpose to smack you upside the head and make you think. And I really dig that. That being said, for me, this one makes sense. Now I'm silver lining playbooking this. This one makes sense because it's the outro into out of this first act. But for me, this is the first time on this album that it's a bit of a flat note musically because I feel repeated for the first time. I'm not saying there's a second time, but it was surprising because the song doesn't stick the way it should, in my opinion, with such a strong narrative, because I'm just getting a little bit too much Euro by this point, and it didn't do anything new for me musically. Again, it's a good song, but it was surprising. It was surprising. Nothing super negative, just the fact that it was a tad bit redundant musically.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that at all. And like I said, it took me time to appreciate the song on its own terms. It took me a year of listening to the album. It was not the immediate favorite because, again, it was redundant. I felt like we've heard this already.
Yeah, but going into the next track, into the next interlude, if you will, I can see how it makes sense for a little bit of turning the brain off as a listener and getting ready for a new, wiping the slate clean and a new piece of the story.
Yes, and that is what we're about to do. But before we do that, I encourage, if you're listening, to please, if you haven't already, subscribe to us wherever you're listening to us. That would be much appreciated, whether it be Spotify, Apple, Amazon. We are on all of those platforms and more. And also, you can also subscribe to us on YouTube if you're listening to us there, because we're available there now too, excitingly. And also, please leave us a nice rating and review. And follow us on social media. You'll see the links in the description below for this episode. And now we are on to Chromatica 2, our second act, as you will. I will say one great thing about the tour was all of these orchestral interludes were used to divide the show into acts, which
that's cool.
Was obvious but awesome still, nonetheless.
I love how she, like, this wasn't in the first intentions of the album,
Yeah.
but once it started taking form, she was just such an awesome artist, an artistic mind to realize, like, hey man, let's get Morgan Kibbe to do these three pieces. I love it. You know, it's the old classical musician in me, but music listener as well. It's so genius. There you go. I had to get a
Yep.
genius out of
It,
this episode. It's genius.
well, this one is genius, and this one is the most known interlude because the transition for this to the next song inspired several memes because it's just so perfect.
It's definitely my favorite out of the three. It's
Yeah,
so great musically.
I mean, it's a meme to this day, but it's because it's so damn good. It just goes into track 8 so perfectly, and that song is none other than 911. This is a song about Lady Gaga and her antipsychotic medication, which, yeah, very revealing song topic here, but again, I appreciate that we're shining a light on this for a major pop star to dive into. Like, yeah, I have to take these pills to prevent a break, and I'm going to share it with all of you. And I admire that. That definitely, I mean, it takes some courage on her part, but also destigmatizes things like mental health medicine because a lot of people have to take it. I have to take it to, keep myself on kilter and, be functioning, frankly, because it's what helps us, function and work our jobs and do podcasts or whatever it may be. You gotta do it sometimes. And the song's robotic sounding on purpose because of the subject matter, but it's brilliant. That's a brilliant decision. And this is not as Euro as the songs that we've heard up to this point, but it doesn't need to be. This was very immediately singled out as an album highlight. There were even folks like, I didn't love the whole Chromatica album, but 911's a great song. That was always singled out. And I agree with that. It definitely is an album highlight, and there's not a song quite like it by Lady Gaga. And it was because of this fanfare that this was chosen as the third single. And fanfare wise, I get it, but this was not a smart single choice. There were just more top 40 friendly tracks on the album than this one. This is still a song about an antipsychotic medication at the end of the day. However catchy it may be, you can still dance to it, but it was not the right choice. It did get an epic long video like some of her earlier singles did, which was a nice return for her earlier fans to have something like that. And there were a lot of cool visuals, but I mean, it topped the bubbling under charts here in the US, did the best in New Zealand. Just love the song. Might be a hot tea take, just should not have been a single. But even if it's a hot tea take, tell me I'm wrong and that this was a single worthy song out of what we've got here.
I wish I could tell you that, and I love this song, but what I'm saying is I can't see it as a radio friendly single only because for me, without Chromatica 2, it
Oh,
does it hits so hard. I stopped myself from cursing on that one. Like it really hits so hard. It's almost like listening to a second album because you get this brooding interlude with and like climaxes and crescendos with these adventurous like pizzicato strings and then boom into robo funk, like straight robo funk. You're in some serious stuff, and I can't think that the casual listener would hit, and I can see why it was a bubbling under single. I love the shift in feeling here. I love the second act that we're going into. I really love that this, and now from a first time listening standpoint, I am starting to get what this album is about and the feeling of its three parts, and I'm blown away. I'm ready for whatever comes, and I dig it, man. I dig it. You have to be on point, the top of your game, producing this album and putting it together, because you are literally sandwiching Europop classic orchestration and then robo funk, and it doesn't miss a beat. It's flawless. Oh God, it's so damn good. I'm so glad to hear that Chromatica 2 is like the popular interlude, because I've listened to it by itself probably 25 times.
Oh
It's
yeah.
there's so much going on musically and storytelling inside of those strings. The lone horn, it's so good. It's so good. But yeah, 911, not being a single contender aside, it's that jam, man. And we get this start into this part of the introspective where we're robotic, puppet like, and we explore all these different routes inside of these in the second third, or the second act of this album, so to speak.
Yes, and one more note I wanted to make. One of the producers on this song was Madion, who is a French DJ who worked previously on the Art Pop album. So another return collaborator for Gaga. I always love to point out when the collaborators come back.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But we do have a pretty notable collaborator only on the next song, which is Plastic Doll. And the big name on this one is none other than Skrillex, one of the biggest EDM DJs. So automatically some anticipation because of that for Plastic Doll, which is a Barbie-inspired song about the objectification of women. And a heavy topic, but a very catchy dance song nonetheless. And there's people who don't like this song. There's people who drag it. This has always been one of my very favorites on the album. I think this topic's just so in her wheelhouse, to talk about this objectification and I just like the M-I-E-I-E plastic, just all the vocal effects, pure Skrillex. He gives this song a special punch that does make it stand out on the album and in this narrative. And there was a remix album for this a year later, Dawn of Chromatica. I'm not going to talk about it too much. It's very hyper pop, but my favorite remix on there was the Ash Nico remix of this song. Yeah, this one's just always knocked it out of the park for me. This was one of only 2 songs from the album Gaga didn't do on the tour. I was a little sad she didn't do this one. I mean, I imagine like a video for this song, and especially I couldn't help but think of this song when Barbie came out now almost a year ago. I mean, so many should have been in the movie. Heck, they should have, you know what? No, I'm going to say it now. If they did it with Bloody Mary because it was on Wednesday or TikTok or whatever, they could have released Plastic Doll as a single to tie into Barbie. And I think Margot Robbie should have been in the video. They could have done a lot with that. Maybe I'm just fantasizing too much, but maybe, who knows, maybe they'll do a Barbie sequel and then Plastic Doll will get its day. I want it to. I just want it to. That's all I'm asking.
I'll tell you what, you're not fantasizing too much, because I was going to finish with it as my hot tea take. How much of a missed opportunity. I had to go and check. I was like, surely this is on the Barbie soundtrack. This is perfect for the Barbie soundtrack. There's no way that they missed out on putting this on that soundtrack. Craziness not to have it here, because this Barbie metaphor is so perfectly well done from the opening part of the narrative, just from the opening of the track. Cut me open, take me out, I come with new bag and new shoes, am I your type? Really perfectly well done throughout here. I mean, we're still on this robotic techno feel, and it feels great inside the narrative. I have to give mad props to Skrillex, because in all honesty, he made this beautiful sound and he put his note here, but he didn't put his Skrillex like patented blah, 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 all over it. And I love that. He could have very easily taken this down the road of, and it might have even fit, in all honesty, the way this album is rolling, of a more hardcore sense inside of his compositions, but he chose not to here. And I think that was a great choice. This is a really, really cool song.
Yes, most definitely. And I think you're right about Skrillex. There's just enough of his touch on it that it doesn't feel out of place, but it still manages to he still marks his territory on it, that's for sure.
He does.
And speaking of collaborations and marked territories, we're going to go into a new realm now with track 10, Sour Candy. This is a collaboration with the K-pop group BLACKPINK. And it started off just with BLACKPINK, but Lady Gaga wanted to work with this group. And as a result, this song, Sour Candy, came about. And this definitely ran the risk of really not fitting on the album. And I will say, I do think it's more of a BLACKPINK song than a Gaga song. But it still does have enough of that 90s house feeling to it to not be too out of place on the album. And it's short and sweet, but it's very catchy. And it was released as a promo single just a day before the album and immediately got a lot of traction because it was a BLACKPINK collab. K-pop is a huge niche of its own. And there was a lot of anticipation behind this track. It topped the charts in both Singapore and Malaysia, made the top 40, and it was BLACKPINK's first top 40 hit. And I think it deserved one. It's not the best song here, but I do enjoy it.
Definitely deserved. BLACKPINK killed it on this track, and it was first listen through. They get a big part of that opening, like a big part of the opening of this song, of time, of real estate in this song. I don't think it takes me out of the album.
No,
I do enjoy what it does here. I really dig on the sour candy metaphors. I like the metaphors in there. I think they're not contrived. They're well done. This is the second time. Here we go. We put a pin in it before. For me, we get back to this Madonna Vogue talk narrative. But I'm going to reiterate here, it fits and it doesn't feel overused. It doesn't feel like a gimmick. It feels organic. And I go back to that foundation of the production here and the production genius, the genius of the production value is what I meant to say here, because we got that foundation. Subconscious listener, we know it's there and it feels natural and organic here, and I love it. It's a cool song. It really is a cool song. I can see why it hit top 40, and it definitely is deserved. Like you said, it fits too, man. It fits. It doesn't take me out, so I enjoy this one.
Yes, and before we move on to the next song, I have to say, so obviously this song got a lot of traction with the album's release and hit the top 40 on its own without even a music video. Now, based on that strong performance, you would think maybe Sour Candy should be a single and get a video and be sent to radio around the world. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. And I know this is the third time I'm talking about a song that should have been an official single, but this was such an obvious choice. I mean, the crossover appeal is huge. I mean, K-pop has topped the charts on its own in the US without a collaboration. And I am angry to this day at the fact that BLACKPINK's song with Selena Gomez got a music video and full single treatment and made it to the top 20, while Sour Candy did not. I will never get over that. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it. This was such a big missed opportunity, and it could have done a lot for this album. And I'm bitter about it. I'm sour candy about it to this day.
Tell them how you feel.
That's the tea, fam. That's the tea on that. So, but who knows? Maybe one day it will become a bigger hit. We never know. It happened with Bloody Mary. It certainly can happen with Sour Candy.
Heard that.
But now we're going to move on to another track, which is our 11th song, Enigma. This song shares a name with Gaga's Vegas residency, the pop one, now that's been discontinued, I think since she's only done the jazz shows. This one's a bit more mid-tempo, than the other tracks here. It's got some nice horns in it. There are many who really like this song. This is my possibly my biggest hot tea take. This is the gun to the head for me. I don't dislike it at all. Um, but I just think it's a bit theatrical for me, just in the context of this album. And she's hamming it up a bit more than she has on the other songs here. And I don't I she has such a strong voice. I don't think that she necessarily needs to do that all the time, and I'm not sure this is the right song to do it with. It's not bad at all. It's better than the weakest songs on other Lady Gaga albums or other albums in general, but it is not my favorite here at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. Where I got nervous, talking Gaga and talking what I didn't like. It's not that I don't like this here, but in this second act, let me do a little love sandwich here. I love the way she mimics the robotic style that we've been rocking through so far in here with her voice and effects in the intro. I love that. I Even though, and they're a big part of what take me out of the feeling of the second act, is those powerful overdone vocals like you were talking about over the baby grand clean piano. On their own, they're good, you know what I'm saying, but they just don't fit this. And then on top of that, we sit on this mid-tempo beat that maybe if it was the final song in the second act here, maybe it would do a little bit better, the same way we got going into the second Chromatica. But right here, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And I hate to say it, because up until this point, it's a pretty flawless flow of an album. But this one here is maybe in the wrong spot, or maybe just a bit too off to fit here. Definitely not my favorite. Good song, but not my favorite the way it flows out on this album.
Yeah, I don't disagree with this probably would have been a better song to end Act Two, because the song that actually does end Act Two is a bit more in keeping with what we've done. In fact, lyrically, it might be closer to Act One, but well, even earlier in Act Two, because it's definitely another very much mental health themed song. Replay. This is a song about psychological abuse, and I mean, as we say, the scars are on my mind are on replay, and this is to me the most relatable song on the album. I've been here so many times where, like, you in this case it's addressed to a lover, but I think it can be addressed to any really just harmful narcissistic person that that you'll deal with. I've dealt with a few in my life, and it can be hard to fully get away from that, because you just remember what they've done and how they've hurt you. And it's the scars on my mind are on replay. It just kind of keeps going and going, whether you want it to or not. And still manages to be a killer dance pop tune with all of that. And I have to say, at the tour, this song, hearing it live, was really amazing for me. And she was into it, and she knew everybody wanted to hear it. She's like, I need to see you jump and put your hands up for replay, because she knew that the real little monsters wanted to hear replay. And I may not have been quite down on the field, but I was jumping. I was very happy to hear replay live. I'm still waiting on that concert film, Lady Gaga. Please put that out for us, of the Chromatica Ball.
Yeah, man, I would have loved to see that. And I would like to see this song live. Going back to, could it have been before Enigma? I didn't want to get into it before we started talking about this, but this is such a really great lights down on the second act. The epitome of this, this self, this introspective here, where death right off the bat, did you pull the trigger or did I, is compared to this breakdown of self-esteem in this terrible, terrible situation, that in this terrible, terrible cycle inside this narrative. And I dig that. I love the way this track takes us along with these haunting background vocals throughout that really give this sense of eeriness. And it doesn't necessarily, it ends up, like you said, being a great dance song, right? But narratively, it doesn't necessarily end us on any kind of triumphant way. And in the 3-act movement, I think it's perfect for the end of Act 2. Lights down, and then we go into Chromatica 3. Really well done. And that's, again, I like the song, but that's why I feel like it couldn't have been in front of Enigma narratively, maybe by sound, but
you are not wrong. It is a great lights down kind of song, but it was interesting. She did it pretty early in the show, actually.
that's wild.
Yeah, it was pretty early on in the show she did it, but she had other songs she had to do later on, I guess. I guess you had to do Replay before you do Shallow.
Yeah, heard that. It didn't happen to go into Chromatica 3 when you saw it, did it?
No.
No, I heard.
Mm-mm. And yes, now we are into our third and final act with the Chromatica 3 interlude. Not as awesome as Chromatica 2. You know what? It's probably the most forgettable of the interludes if we're going to go there, but it still is pretty cool. Still very nice, classically inclined stuff here.
It is. It speaks like a end interlude. It lets us know musically where we're going, and it does its job, but not as powerful as Chromatica 2, man. That one
No,
is on point.
no, but we do open up this final act of the album in another spectacular form with our final collaboration here, a duet with Elton John, Sign from Above. This is the first time a song with Elton John had been on an Lady Gaga, which is kind of crazy because they've been friends for quite some time at this point. He even gave her a shout out in his memoir as one of the dearest friends of his life. She's the godmother to his kids, so which we love to see that. And producer Axwell, who we've seen earlier in the album, he worked on this with Elton John a while before and just had it sitting. It just wasn't quite ready yet. But then he had it on his computer and said, wait, he's friends with Lady Gaga. So he sent the song to Lady Gaga and Blood Pop, and they loved it, and they agreed this needs to be a duet with Elton John. And it became one. And it's a song about the healing power of music. The sign is a reference to sound waves, which I think is very cool. In all reality, I think Elton makes this song for me. He sounds fantastic on it. His voice works really well with this dance production, but it has enough of his signature piano sound for it to be a great melding of both Elton and Gaga. And of course, that breakdown at the end is epic. So epic.
So good.
Realistically, I do think that this song is definitely elevated by the fact that it's a duet with none other than Sir Elton himself. If it were on its own, it would be a more forgettable track. It probably would be my least favorite here. If it were just a solo on its own, it's not as powerful, but having a true living legend on it, who we're both big fans of, I know, how can you not like Elton John? Come on. That's, and I'm glad it exists. And in a weird way, I think it probably did foreshadow his collaboration with Dua Lipa, Cold Heart, that ended up being a huge hit for him over 5 decades into his career, because who else can do that but Elton John and Cher? Only those two.
Yeah, this is Elton's song, man. I'm with you. He kills it, but is it? Yes, it's still bright. Yes, it's still a really awesome way to come off of that melancholy lights down right before Chromatica 3 and open the third act with this When I Was Young story about the healing power of music. I love it. But without Elton, it doesn't strike like the lightning that she wanted. It really just keeps rolling because of him. And that outro, man, the panpipes, like I don't know who wrote that. Well, but it's there musically, and it is insane, man. It is insane. This is such a really bright and awesome way to open this third act. And it's a cool song, man. I dig it. I dig it. A very mathematical composition, but it's
Yeah.
still so good, man. It breaks perfectly throughout the whole thing. I jam on it. I smile thinking about this song.
Yeah. Yeah, really. And I just also love the fact that Elton John still was so inspired to be doing this over 50 years into his career. That's
Yeah, he's the man.
just incredible. But of course, he is the man.
Yeah.
He is the man. You know what? He should play at the Sphere too. He may be done touring. He should just do a Sphere show, I think.
Everybody should play at the Sphere once.
Well,
Gosh,
yes, but
but yeah, Elton at the Sphere would be sick. Bring him out in the Gaga show. That's how you do it. Bring Elton out in the Gaga show and do some stuff. That'd be great.
No, he needs his own show. He's Elton. Come on. Yeah. But enough about that. We're going to go into another another visually arresting song, I guess you could say, with our penultimate track, 1,000 Doves, or 1,000 Doves, as it's said on the song. This was initially a piano-based ballad. We got that demo on the Target Deluxe CD of the album, and it worked very nicely in that form. But the producer said, no, this is a dance song, and it is. She even said it's a cry for help. Like, I need some help. I need the help of 1,000 doves to get me up. But out of all the 90s house songs on this album, I think this might be the most 90s sounding of them all. And I am here for it. It does help, even though it's like a sad kind of like I really need help, it helps it be a bit uplifting, which I really appreciate. Yeah, this is the least streamed non-interlude song on the album, and for that I have to say I'm not here for that. This is not least streamed worthy. It's pretty late in the album, I realize that, but it's a lovely tune. It could be a bit cheesy, but I don't think it comes off that way. And she did the piano version at the Chromatica show I went to, and it was one of the highlights of that for me. I know some of the future shows she took it out and played Angel Down instead, which was from Joanne. I'm glad I got 1,000 Doves, because it's such a beautiful, powerful song in both forms. And I think when you hear that demo, it really showcases the strength of not just this composition, but her compositions in general. It really shows that beneath all of these electronic beats and bloops, there's really solid songcraft underneath that.
Yeah, most definitely. This one, for me, there's Easter eggs throughout this. I love how we get this lurking loneliness in the narrative. And maybe it's just me, but there is a play on the Halloween theme, the dun, 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 inside of it that lends itself to this creepy vibe, or this lurking loneliness again that I was talking about. She lifts it up though. She really does. We're tying everything together. I'm not saying we're putting a nice bow on a pile of crap. We're really doing what a third act should do here. And even though we got a little bit of a triumphant piece inside, or a healing piece inside, sign from above, here we get another just honest piece inside this introspective, and there still is some stuff that she needs some saving from. I enjoy it. I think as a penultimate track, it really sets up and gets ready for the ending, as it should. It does its job, like straight up does its job.
Most definitely. And we're going to go back to 90s house for sure with our final track, which is Babylon. It's a song about the harmful impact of gossip with some very clever wordplay. Babble on. This is definitely the campiest song on the album. Definitely the most likely to be heard on an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race. That's for sure, but I absolutely love it. And yeah, this one got Vogue comparisons immediately. Some even went so far as to say it was a ripoff, but I don't think so. And okay, folks, the most Vogue ripoff Lady Gaga did was in 2009 when she did a celebrity rap on Dance in the Dark. You don't get more Vogue derivative than that. This is still its own song to me. This is not just Gaga's Vogue. Even with the influence, but Vogue is a fertile ground for influence, being such an iconic house track in its own right, while having been a Madonna #1 hit. It straddled both of those sides. So there's a reason people keep going back to Vogue all these years later. So that aside, I'm not going to give her any flack for it. I really enjoyed this song, and it has a message that I think we could all heed a bit more often. We're only human. We've all been guilty of gossip. Very few people aren't. But it's a really nice way to end the album. I like the little choirs there and just her very fun ballroom style. I mean, yeah, she did serve it ancient city style.
Party like it's BC.
Yeah.
Man, I love it. I love it. This is the perfect ending for this album, man. And I'm gonna wrap it all the way back into she was really high on it after A Star Is Born as far as media coverage. It's part of where she was coming out of.
Mm-hmm.
I won't even go scrutinized, but just in the eye period. But that power drove her to embrace her roots on this album and really go back and give us some gaga-ness. And that's why this powerful beast that for me, not only, and I know I put a pin on it earlier, and this is the culmination of that Vogue drop throughout here. But I mean, I get Grace Jones here. I get just powerful, I just get powerful, powerful. I love the campiness because it's just that powerful ender. And I say campiness in the most respectful way
Yeah.
here. It's perfectly done. This is the dancing that I've been doing to this whole album. When you get to the end, man, you can't help to just let it out because it's the way that this is set up. What a great ender. This is the kind of ender that I love for the fact of it makes you want to just start the album over again.
Oh yeah.
It's not like a see you soon and a glimpse of what I might be doing in the next album. It is bow. I just killed it. I just killed a 3-act run of looking inside myself, and it was cathartic enough for me to let it all hang out here in Babylon. And gets and get the shit talkers a little bit of burn as well on the way out.
Yeah.
That's some diva shit. That's some high level stuff there, and done so artistically beautiful. What a great way to end this album.
Most definitely. I did mention the Target edition earlier, that the bonus tracks, there was the other 1,000 Doves. We also got a Stupid Love remix, and there was another song separate on it called Love Me Right. It doesn't fit this album at all. It was honestly a bit more mid-tempo 90s R&B influence than house influence. It's an okay song, but it belonged as a bonus track, just not just because of quality, but more so it just didn't fit into the Chromatica concept. So, but yeah, there we have it, Chromatica. I'm so glad we got to do this one. I now have to ask, what's your grade for this planet, as we call it?
For this planet, for this 3-act planet, I first time listen loved going through this adventure, really realizing the genius behind taking me through a 3-act introspective look inside of herself. Not only was the production level, like I said earlier, top level genius stuff, but the pacing throughout this album is like a Broadway show, or it's up there. It's a full on realized album from front to back. It falters, in my opinion, twice, but nothing ever that can really tarnish it as a whole, and then ends with one of the most triumphant diva in your face, drop on the dance floor and come back up kind of feeling. And for that, I give this one an A, a strong, strong A.
Yeah, this you already knew I was going to give it an A. Of course, it's my favorite Gaga album, and in a weird way, I think it's a bit underrated by her fans because for so long, art pop has become the dark horse that's gotten the cult following because it was the most maligned of her albums. And Chromatica was a triumphant follow up to a hugely successful film and soundtrack. And did it make waves in the way some of the earlier albums did? No, but it didn't need to, arguably. And I just think it's definitely not a flop album commercially and certainly not artistically, but in a weird way, I think it's gotten a bit underrated, even from the get-go. And I think that people need to really look at what she was saying here to understand why this is such a genius album, actually. Too often people want to say that about like Born This Way or even art pop, but this is a true genius moment for her. So, favorite song, you gotta pick one.
All right, but it's two.
Oh, it's two.
Chromatica 2 into 911 is the jam piece on this album, hands down. It's such a killer. Like I said, I've listened to Chromatica 2 like 25 times, but very rarely does it not come with the full package of 911. Oh, my jam.
No, it can't. I gotta go with Rain on Me. What a beautiful, powerful song. The Replay is an honorable mention. I can't not say that. But yeah, speaking of Rain on Me, next week we are going to be discussing the newest album from Ariana Grande, which is entitled Eternal Sunshine. It is apparently based on the Jim Carrey movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind to an extent, which I haven't seen before, but now I'm going to have to prepare for this episode.
Really? Like in a concept sense? Or I guess I'll have to research in on this, but
we'll have to see. And we've gotten the lead. I've heard it's a good movie. I'm looking forward to finally watching it. It came out when I was a kid, so obviously I missed it. But yeah, I'm very curious to see. And the lead single that Ariana Grande gave us is a 90s influenced dance track with a Paula Abdul homage paying music video. So I think we might be getting a bit of a Rain on Me direction from this album from Ariana, and I'm really excited for that because that's what I've been wanting from her. And it's an interesting time for Ariana Grande, but we will get into that next week with all that tea. And I'm very much looking forward to discussing the album and seeing what it has to offer because Ariana has she's managed to capture the public's imagination for over a decade at this point and is one of the biggest pop stars alive, even though it's been almost 4 years since she's put out an album. So I'm very excited to hear what she does.
Yeah, man, she's always been an interesting one to say the least. So yeah. I'm excited to see what goes down here, especially now. Spotless Mind, we'll see. Let's see what she's got for us on that. That's cool.
Yeah, most definitely. And we folks, just letting you know, we've got a lot of new releases coming up from after Ari. There will be some people who are part of the Turntables and Tea Hall of Fame. They've been on the show before.
Yeah, man.
But we definitely have to discuss what they're going to do next because they're just all people. We want to know what they're going to do. So
yeah, we know exactly where we're going to, and the calendar's there. I'm super excited. You're real when you say Hall of Famers for us.
Yeah,
there's some artists that are better be ready to spill tea on these guys. They better bring their A game because they're up there in our Hall of Fame. So we shall see.
We have high standards. So
yes.
But in the meantime, we hope Ari can bring it for us. And yeah, Yeah, keep that eternal sunshine flowing until we're back here next week. Take care of yourselves until that.
Peace.